B'simcha, with so much joy and gratitude to IJS, Mark, Adi for helping with the sharing the text, all of your support. Ma nora hamakom hazeh, mamash, as we learn in this parsha. Ma nora, how awesome, how wonderful this place is. Baruchot habaot, baruchim habaim, welcome, shalom l'kulam. To some of you, boker tov, to others, tzahayim tovim. Those in this part of the world, it's already pitch black outside, erev tov. So let's learn a little, share a little, explore, and we'll bring that teachings into our contemplative practice. So good to be back. It's always so good to be back. Todah. So we see in the beginning of this week's parsha, they say, shortly after, Ma nora hamakom hazeh, as said by Yaakov, 3 verses that have to do with an oath, that have to do with a vow. I'm not going to read the verses. You have them there, both in English and in the Hebrew. The teaching is based on a text from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of a tzaddik be for a blessing, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, in his volume, Likutei Sichot, volume 25. So basically what's happened, the plot. On his way to Haran, Yaakov camped for the night on Har Moriah, where he had his famous dream, in which he saw the angels ascending and descending a ladder, reaching from the earth to the heaven. Upon waking, in Genesis 28:18, we read that Yaakov took the stone on which he slept and raised it as a monument. He then made the above quoted vow in verses 20, 21, and 22. Now, the syntactical construction of Yaakov's oath raises an important question in our relationship with the divine. And when I say the divine, it's the presence of the Shekhinah within us, the immanent, palpable, visceral encounter with the divine. This oath, though, presents a challenge. The oath consists of 2 parts. First, the conditions for its fulfillment, and then Yaakov's fulfillment of the oath once the conditions are met. What is not clear, though, is where the conditions end and the fulfillment of the vow begins. Verse 20, if you look up at the verse in English and or Hebrew, and the first part of verse 21 clearly are conditions. If God will be with me, safeguard me on this road that I'm traveling, provide me with bread to eat, clothes to wear, and I return in peace to my father's house, all that clearly are conditions. Verse 22 speaks of what Yaakov will do for God, meaning the fulfillment of his oath. And what is that? Then this stone which I have erected as a monument, this Evan, shall be a house of God. First, it's a stone that he slept on. Then it becomes a monument. And now he's saying it will be Beit Elohim. Okay, the problem, though, is the question is the second part of verse 21, because it could be read and or then. And the Lord will be my God, or then the Lord will be my God. Now, just as a reference, so we understand the impact of this, in Kabbalistic literature, the word the Lord is the transcendental, the Adonai, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, the beyond everything, beyond the sum total of all of creation. My God means that same energy, that same force is also within me. That's the Shekhinah. And it's mine. It becomes a part of me, which in of itself is a contradiction. So be it. It's the divine contradiction. The question is this part of the conditions of the vow's fulfillment, or is it part of the vow itself? In other words, does the second part of verse 21 mean, and God will be, the Lord will be my God, or then the Lord will be my God? This question expresses the heart of the matter, and it's really the heart of our practice. Is experiencing the transcendental nature of the Lord in an immanent way as my God a condition for the vow's fulfillment, or is a part of the vow itself. In fact, two of the greatest biblical commentators and thinkers, Rashi and the Ramban, Nachmanides, debate this very point. According to Rashi, the first two verses in completion are the conditions of Yaakov's vow, while the third verse is its fulfillment. In order for Yaakov to make the stone a house of God, he requires first to experience the divine as his God. Not just a theological belief, an actual visceral experience. The Ramban, however, sees the phrase in question as, then God will be my God. Then the Lord will be my God. As part of the promise itself, not as a condition, meaning that if the Lord will provide Yaakov with protection, with food, with clothes, and a peaceful return home, then in fact, he will make the Lord his God. And the stone will be the abode for the divine presence. What is the deeper significance of these two interpretations? And why would the Torah recount Yaakov's oath in a way that allows for variant readings? In the Midrash Tanchuma in Parshat Naso, we learn there from the Chazal, from the sages, that the purpose of all of creation is that God wants a dwelling place in the lowly realms, in the realm Tachton, Lamata. The Baal HaTanya explains in Tanya, Reb Shneur Zalman of La'adi in chapter 36, that the lowly realm is our physical world, of which none is lower in the sense that it obscures the light of God, to the extent that it contains forces which actually oppose God, with the claim of separateness and contesting the truth that the creator of all is the ultimate and exclusive reality. That's not obvious when we just look out at the world. There's a concealment. This is the meaning of Yaakov's oath, to make this stone a house of God, meaning Yaakov is pledging himself to humankind's calling in life, to fulfill the divine purpose for creation by making the material world a dwelling for God, a home, a dirah, a bayit, Beit Elohim. Yaakov is promising to make the stone, the brute substantiality of the physical world, into a divine abode. Each one of us, therefore, possesses as well the capacity to be transformed within our own selves into a house of God. Now, to achieve this, Yaakov requires several things from God, as I do, as you do. It's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. However, I just can't do it. So when he makes these conditions, Yaakov is not displaying arrogance by issuing an ultimatum. To the contrary, his conditions are exactly that. Those realities that will enable his soul to subsist in a physical body and achieve its aim of making the world and oneself a home for God. So the question is, can the human being, though, be in service to God without experiencing God as a personal and intimate presence in one's life? Is that possible? Ultimately, the answer is no. God desires that we be in relationship with the divine, which is really the yesod. It's one of the foundational beginnings of our practice. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, we say after the Shema, that our life's work should not be a robotic implementation of commandments that are vague, mysterious, and understood by few, but a labor of love, a spiritual practice that stimulates our minds, excites our hearts, and fulfills every faculty. So is this another condition, or is this part of the mission? Rashi, who comes to explain the literal meaning of the verse, views the issue in its quintessential simplicity. Why was man created? To serve the Creator, to make a home for God below. Everything else is a condition. If it is required that a person experience being in relationship with the divine, then the Lord God will provide that for the person. just as God provides everything else for us that we need. The end goal is to make the world a home for the divine. The Ramban, though, reads the Torah through the lens of the mystic, with an eye to the experiential and the anthropomorphic dimension of reality. From this perspective, a person's experience of the divine is not just a tool, it's the very purpose of life. Indeed, in the Zohar, it describes that the whole purpose of creation is so that God be known. So as with all variant interpretations of Torah, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. These and these are both the words of the living God. The soul's elevation to a deeper relationship with God through its sanctification of physical life is both a condition for and a component part of the purpose of creation. So the Rebbe concludes by teaching that, therefore, an integral part of God's dwelling is a human self, for whom the Lord is my God, for whom a life in the service of the Almighty, being in relationship with the divine, is in fact deeply satisfying and ultimate in self-realization. As we prepare to sit together in contemplative practice, I would like to suggest, and I invite all of you, ultimately, we're being called to remain open to both Rashi's and the Ramban's points of view, cultivating the practice of holding paradox in a true Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. Let us begin by sharing 3 breathing cycles, receiving breath, holding and gazing at the gift, and then gently, with gratitude, returning. And then we'll move into silence. Let our minds wander with the paradox. Let our heart be open to all the feelings of living in this beautiful, exquisite, divine paradox. And as we gently and softly prepare to bring our sit together to a close, I invite all of you to dwell in the paradox. The Lord is my God. Is it a condition for, or is it the fulfillment of? Probably both. Dwelling in the paradox with compassion, holding space to encounter the fluidity and variety of the endless shades of gray that reside between the absolute extremes of either black or white. May we all merit Yiscah Hiratzon to transform this stone, Eben Hazot, into a Beit Elohim, into a house of God. Let us close with sharing 3 cycles of receiving, holding, and returning Nishmat Chaim. Toda, toda l'kuchem.
Thank you so much. Amen, amen. Thank you so much, Yiscah Smith, for that gorgeous Torah and practice, which we seal, friends, as we always do, with an opportunity for those in mourning, observing yard sites, to recite the Mourner's Kaddish, and for those who are not, to form a supportive community, to hold them and to hold their grief. And you're invited, as always, to put into the chat box the name or names of those whose soul you're holding in your heart today, and those you're honoring, and invite those who are participating in Kaddish to join me by rising in body or in spirit. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yama, Dibra, Chibute, V'yamlich, Malchute, V'chayechon, V'yamechon, V'chaye, D'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'zman Kariv, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei Rabbah, Barach, V'olam V'amen. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ar, Yitramam, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalal, Shmei Kedusha, Brichu, La'ela, Mikol Birchata, V'shivata, Tushbachata, V'nechemata, V'amiran Ba'ama, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shlama Rama Min Shemaya, L'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom B'Roma, Oseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thanks for joining us today. Thanks to our teacher, Yiscah Smith, joining us from home in Jerusalem. Wonderful to get to, just a treat to be able to have a visit with you in your flat there, Yiscah, and to breathe the air, as it were. And oops, hold on a sec. And want to thank, of course, Dale Friedman and David Furliger, who sponsored our practice today in loving memory of their parents, Albert Furliger, Miriam Furliger, and Don Friedman. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing for David and Dale and for all those whose lives they touched, and through us, through the merit of our practice today. As always, thanks Adi Stein for holding us together and creating this beautiful container, tech container for us to be able, in which we can practice together. Those of you who are leaving us now are welcome to join us, and we hope you'll join us tomorrow or any time the rest of the week. Tomorrow will be led in practice by Rabbi Deborah Ornstein. On Thursday by Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein, also joining us from Israel. And on Friday, I will lead our sit into Shabbat. And so we hope you'll join us for any or all of those meditations. And of course, as always, everything is recorded, available on our YouTube channel, along with the links to the texts which are shared. So if you do have a question you'd like to put to Yiscah Smith about this teaching for today, please put it in the chat box, or any reflections on the practice that you'd like to share with the group. You're welcome to do that. And I will try to keep an eye on it. If it's a question, please preface it with a question. And I will try to keep an eye on that. So Yiscah, first of all, thank you. That was really gorgeous. I happened to go to a camp called Camp Paradox on Paradox Lake in the Adirondacks. No accident in my book. I love paradox, and I really think that paradox is, whenever I am aware of a paradox or it's brought to my attention, I always am drawn to it. Said like, well, anything that makes no sense, probably has a lot of truth there. So thank you for inviting us to sit with that paradox. So I want to just review it just so we have it clear, and also think about how we experience it in that practice. So I'm gonna, as your student, I'm going to feed back to you what I heard, and you tell me if we got it. So we have this, this classic text where Yaakov says these words, and it looks like he's questioning the revelation, his experience that he just had, where he wakes up and says, "Oh my God, God's here, and I didn't realize it." Then he says, "Well, if blah blah blah, then then Yud He Vav He will be my God." Okay, and so you're bringing these two ways of understanding that. Rashi's, maybe when I get them confused, Rashi's, which I think leads to it supports more the conditionalness, conditionality. Like, well, if I actually then have this experience in my own life of God, then actually this will be the house of God, and this God that I'm experiencing, which is transcendent and beyond me, then that will be the case. Whereas Rambam is saying, yes, and as I go about my daily life here and experience the divine as a living presence in my life and in this world, that's really what it's about.
That's making the stone the house of God.
Right. And ultimately, that's what this is about. How do we make the stone, that is in the material world in which we live, which, as you said, because it's material, it acts as a hiding place or concealment for the divine presence. How do we notice it in the here and now, in our bodies, in our surroundings, in our interactions? Yeah, got that? Okay.
Thank you for thank you for reviewing that with me.
No, I'm just spitting it back to you. So, I want to connect it. Many of you, I'm sure, were on our sits last week with Sam Feinsmith. Yiscah, you probably weren't, but just to with Sam, I can also summarize this and invite you to comment on how. So Sam was basically doing a 5-session series on meditation as Jewish prayer. That is meditation which helps us grow in awareness of the divine presence. Exactly what he was doing. Like, how does a stone become aware that it's that it's actually an abode of the divine, right? So what Sam was inviting us to do was to infuse our awareness of our body. It took us through the 4 worlds, basically, from the physical all the way through to the most spiritual aspects of ourselves, by infusing that with awareness and consciousness. And then in the last world, the world of Atzilut, basically kind of having a sense of the edges between the self and the divine being blurred, not totally dissolving, but so I take that as the Rambam here. That is, that I am moment to moment striving to remember and wake up to the divine presence that is within me, as a way of experiencing it in the world. Does that sound like what you're describing the Rambam's teaching here? Ramban, by the way, not
Ramban. Yeah.
But just to be clear, Ramban. This is Nachmanides, not Maimonides. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that the Ramban, the reason he is considered to be the mystic, well, there's many reasons particular to this study, to this teaching, is because he trusts the process. I believe that this is how I'm learning it, that if Hashem, if the creator, if the divine force, if the one provides for me the necessary ingredients for me to have a mind, heart, body, and soul intact, well, then in fact, I will be able to take this stone, and because I'm experiencing as a result of the well-beingness of the different dimensions within myself, I trust that I will actually sense the Lord is within me. And then within me, I can make the home. Like those two come together. One is only as good, according to the Ramban, one is only as good as the other. They support each other. They support each other. And I believe the trusting, that's a very big part of my practice, rather than believing. There's belief, which is more cerebral, and then there's trusting, which is more in the heart.
More experiential.
Experiential, yes.
Right.
That's why we say the divine is an immanent. It's the kol damamadaka. It's the still small voice.
Right.
I trust that if I have enough food, if I have enough shelter, if I have a good night's sleep, if God is blessing me with sustainability, with financial resources, if all that is taken care of, I trust I can do this. I can do this. Right. I really can.
Right.
It's not a condition.
So the other thing you said that I thought was, for me, was like, I experienced as a chidush, as, a new awareness that I thought, okay, like, why didn't I say that before? Is to use the words immanence and transcendence in relationship to our practice. That is,
yes.
Which is, I guess, a shorthand for what you're describing, as I'm understanding it, that for some people, or at certain times in our lives, we can be struck by a sense of transcendence, right? Awareness of the divine presence as a transcendent presence. And then there are moments when we can have that experience as in the sense of divine immanence, that is in indwelling awareness, right? And what you just tell me if I'm off here, that what we're describing here is bringing those together in some way. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say even more than that, that what this teaching is about is how to cultivate the immanent inner experience. To the PSSner Rebbe, who I teach to a lot, and I guess I'm a chassidah of his. I'm very motivated and inspired by the PSSner Rebbe. This for him, throughout all his 7 Sfarim, including Ish Kodesh, which is he wrote in Warsaw during the Holocaust, for him, the quintessential experience of what it means to be Jewish is to cultivate hitkavut, closeness, but not closeness with this idea that's beyond me, closeness with an experience within me. And actually, he believes that's the tradition following the Baal Shem Tov. This is what he brought to the Jewish world, was instead of believing in, experience or encountering, and have a mifgash, like a meeting with the Kol Damamadaka, with the Shekhinah within.
Well, you see, you're getting an invitation to teach in West Palm Beach. So better get your tickets. How can we get you to teach at West Palm Beach? That's from Jan.
Invite me.
You're invited. Okay. So let's transition here. Oh, here's a question from Lori. Okay. How do we, if indeed we should, discern between the Shekhinah within us, the Kol Damama Daka, versus what feels like intuition, but is actually our will that tries to be heard even louder? How do we discern between the Shekhinah and I'd say Kol Damama within, that's the divine will maybe, versus what we may think of as our intuition, but is actually our will that is speaking the louder? That's okay. Basically, this is, I think, the kind of the essence of spiritual direction, which is how do we tease apart our will and the inner voice that represents our will versus the inner voice that represents the divine will in our lives?
Well, the short answer
that's an easy. Go ahead. That's an easy one. Go ahead.
We just have to read Pirkei Avot. If you make your will God, if you make God's will your will, God will make your will His will or her will.
Yeah, but
So
how do you do that?
how do well?
How do we
Okay,
do that?
so to answer the specific beginning of your question, as I experience and I practice, I don't discern between Kol Damamadaka and Shekhinah. I believe the Shekhinah is the noun of the existence of the divine within me. And she speaks to me as the Shekhinah through the still small voice. Now, Rav Kook writes that we have, in order to hear that Kol Damamadaka, that deeper will, and he does believe our deeper will is the divine will. There is an alignment. There's actually more than an alignment. There's an achdut. We have a sixth sense, and it's the chush intuitia, he calls it. It's the sense of intuition. It's our intuitiveness. The P.S. Etzner, not so much that he disagrees, he sees it in a different way, though. He believes if we practice through expanding consciousness, where we sense the divine, we can actually transform the five senses that we use to engage in the physical. We can then use them inwardly to experience the Kol Damamadaka. So we can see, we can hear, we can touch, smell, and in a less physical way.
That's beautiful.
I think they're both, and they're both really saying the same thing, that rather than be limited, become expansive.
I can see the artists among us smiling at that. That's beautiful. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're practicing. Well, we have about 3 minutes. It's a great question from Martha about what's the relationship between our soul and neshama and Shekhinah. Are they the same? Is the soul seeking the Shekhinah? So I'm going to put that question to you, and I do want to see if we have a minute at least for you to talk about your community there in Jerusalem.
If we see the soul, if we understand the soul, as it says in the book of Eov and Job, that it's a chelik, it's a piece of God from above, the way we experience the soul is through Shekhinah. So they're really synonymous. However, it's a subjective experience. The soul is objective. How I experience, which is a subjective experience of the objective reality, is through the Shekhinah. I guess it could be like, you could say we're all human beings, but we experience each other in a more particular way, even though we're all generally human beings as a species.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us. I'm going to put the link to your website back in the chat box for folks.
And also on the text, my email is on the text.
Okay, great. And just tell us in a minute, tell us about, this community in Jerusalem. When next time folks are in Jerusalem and you have Shabbat, you can all go sit in the garden in Yiscah's backyard. Tell us about it.
I host a gathering of beautiful, yearning souls to connect, to expand, to hear the Kol Daka in community. It is a retreat. Not a 3-day or 7-day or 10-day. It's about from 9:30. We begin at 9:30. I share a short teaching. Then we go into meditation for about a half hour. Then we have a woman who leads us in chanting, which is just so beautiful. And then we all share, and then we have a kiddush. It's an alternative to the more traditional, whether it's Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox synagogue practice, which is wonderful also, of course. It's just some of us are looking for something else, and it just has fallen into my garden. And I've been cultivating this for 3 years. You're all invited, all of 117 participants and your friends and relatives.
Must be some garden.
Yeah. Well, I'll worry about if all 117 come at once. But you are invited now that the gates of tourists have opened up in Israel. Do feel comfortable, encouraged, invited to be in touch with me. I would be so blessed to have you as our guest.
Thank you for the invitation, Yiscah, and thank you as always for the beautiful Torah and leading us today. Friends, it's great to be with you. Thanks, Adi, and thanks, David and Dale, for sponsoring us today. And hope to see you all tomorrow to practice with Rabbi Deborah Ornstein at our usual time.